Good morning, and I'm Reverend Alison, and today we're looking at Genesis 16, which I will read for us first. Now Sarah, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian slave girl whose name was Hagar, and Sarah said to Abraham, "You see that the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go in to my slave girl. It may be there that I shall obtain children by her." And Abram listened to the voice of Sarah. So after Abram had lived for 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her slave girl, and gave her to her husband Abram as a wife. He went into Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Then Sarah said to Abraham, "May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my slave girl to your embrace, and when she saw she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me." But Abram said to Sarah, "Your slave girl is in your power. Do to her as you please." Then Sarah dealt harshly with her, and she ran away from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave girl of Sarah, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She said, "I am running away from my mistress Sarah." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Now you have conceived and shall bear a son, and you shall call him Ishmael, for the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He shall be a wild ass of a man, and his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall live at odds with all his king." So she named the Lord who spoke to you. So to her, "You are Elroy," she said. "Have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him?" Therefore the well was called Bir al-Hal-Roy. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar had borne, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. This is the story of Sarah and Hagar, of Isaac and Ishmael, and it is described by Phyllis Tribble as one of the texts of terror. And it's a story which raises many painful issues, as much today as then. Issues of infertility, of surrogacy, of domestic slavery, of identity. It is a story about power and trust. God had promised Abram descendants as numerous as the stars, and yet he had no children. And Sarah was not only infertile, but now she was postmenopausal. Sarah was the wife of a wealthy herdsman, occupying a position of privilege and power within the confines of a patriarchal society. But she had been betrayed twice by Abram, as he tried to pass her off as his sister, and both times God comes to her rescue. A fact she seems to forget when she tries to sort out the promise made by God by human means. So she meddles in God's plans as she conspires to secure a child via Hagar. Sarah never refers to Hagar by name, only as "my slave girl." A name is so important in the Bible, as name defines who someone is, their character, their personality, their place in society, and a significant moment is often marked by a change of name. And when we pick up the story in chapter 21, Abram and Sarah have become Abraham and Sarah as a mark of the new covenant. Hagar is representative of all the nameless servants, the abused and persecuted in history. She is one of the first women in the Bible to experience abuse and rejection. She is treated like an object. She's Egyptian, single, poor, bonded, young and fertile. And compare this to Sarah, who is Hebrew, married, rich, free, old and barren. Sarah encourages Abram to sleep with Hagar. She talks about building herself up through Hagar, but Hagar is spoken about as a wife, not a concubine, thus diminishing Sarah in relationship to her servant. When Hagar conceives, there is further reordering of the relationship. Hagar has a perceived superiority and despises Sarah, looks down upon her and ridicules her. Abram essentially says, she's your servant, you sort it out. And due to the punishment, Hagar flees. Hagar flees in the wilderness, a journey which will take her from a position of bondage through flight and back into bondage. Hagar flees into the wilderness, but it wasn't the hostile place that she could have perceived and expected. She found water there. She is now a pregnant refugee seeking rest or asylum in the wilderness. But the wilderness is also a place where people go to encounter God. And today, in this story, the angel of the Lord appeared, a divine presence who questions her, and for the first time we hear the voice of Hagar. The angel asks, "Where have you come from?" Hagar answers, "Sarah." "Where are you going?" To which she has no answer. The angel of the Lord instructs her to return to her mistress. This is the first biblical annunciation where the angel appears to a woman. And the angel today predicts a male child, names the child Ishmael, and predicts a future life for the child, a wild ass of a man. And there is also the promise of great multiplying of Hagar's offspring. And in this, Hagar becomes a prototype of special mothers in Israel. Also, she was greatly blessed to have seen God and lived. She returned and bore Abram a son, and did in fact call him Ishmael. Unfortunately, when we pick up the story again in chapter 21, we see the repetition of bondage, flight and bondage motive, the central theme of Exodus. So why did Sarah try and sort things out in her own strength? And why do we try and do it today? She failed to trust God's promise. She seemed to have forgotten that he came to her rescue at least twice. Her expectations of how that promise would be manifest were earthly, human expectations, and she tried to throw power, position and wealth into solving things her way, and the person of lowest status was exploited